just shows the depths to which she has sunk.
My Lord, the greatest respect.
Excuse me. Mr. Chikata, the practice is that you lawyers draft affidavits for parties, deponents in general, whether it's a party or whoever, yes, in applications. So please don't let us go that far. It may be councils.
Beyond that, Mr. Chikata, I would advise that you withdraw that statement. It's not.
My Lord, I withdraw the statement about the depths to which she has sunk. I withdraw that statement. And in place of that statement, I would respectfully say, very well. My Lord, just to say that a paragraph like that does not suggest an adequate understanding of the issues which we raise in this application. Just to say that, and I'm sorry that I used unduly strong language. And I apologize to the person of the chairperson of the first respondent. Now, my lords, my point, however, is that this affidavit of the first respondent rather than seek to offer your lordships a reason why you should not exercise your discretion to allow us to open our case, this affidavit only resorts to attacking our case, unfortunately. That is all it does. And I need not read any more passages to make that point. But I just draw your attention to that and avoid being provoked into comments that will get me into trouble. My lords, the affidavit in opposition, that second respondent, has also filed, is from Kweku Esifi, a lawyer. And my lords will see that in paragraph 12, the deponent says the instant application does not raise any new matter of relevance which could not have been discovered by diligent effort and so on. All the, my lords, this is not, we're not asking for leave to adduce fresh evidence. That's not the purpose of this application. In the sense that, we're not asking to adduce fresh evidence in the sense that you do in an appeal scenario, where as a matter of discovery of new facts, you put before the Court of Appeal that we have found new facts and we're coming. That's not the nature of application. The nature of application is, very precise. It is to reopen our case on the basis that we acted on the basis of certain representations. In our view, the chairperson of the first respondent was not even entitled to resign from those representations, but she appears to have done. And we are simply saying that we wish to reopen our case for the purpose that we have intimated to this court. And my lords, it is our respectful submission that the first respondent and his chairperson should in fact be the people who, on account of a community of interest with the Constitution of the Republic, would jump at the opportunity to come and give an account of their stewardship. The first respondent and its chairperson should be the ones who would want the world to know that they exercise their stewardship in accordance with the Constitution, by reference to due process, because there are allegations of lack of due process. And there is even evidence from cross-examination by counsel for the first respondent. There is evidence that he brought in about vote padding, for instance. There is evidence which he brought in about material on the pen drive that was in evidence from the petitioner's first witness, which testified to vote padding. Now, my lords, indeed, before I conclude my submissions, we respectfully would ask that we play the videotape which we have put in evidence of Mr. Mark Manu indicating very clearly that in his view, not in his view, just indicating very clearly that when they come to court, there will be testimony about vote padding in favor of the petitioner. Now, the reason why this is really rather critical is because we would imagine that this chairperson of the first respondent would want to disabuse the minds of the people of Ghana of any suggestion that there have been such grave malpractices in the context of the election that she supervised. And my lords, we have her testimony. Well, I'm sorry, not her testimony. We have, because we don't have her testimony yet. We have her counsel putting to a witness. And my lords, clearly, when your counsel puts something to a witness, it must come from your instructions. Otherwise, the counsel is acting unprofessionally. That's what our rules say. So when her counsel puts evidence of vote padding and gets confirmation from a witness of that evidence, well, this is a serious matter because it affects the whole issue of the rights of voters to have a credible election with results that are declared in accordance with valid votes and all that. And yet we had that situation where counsel put to the witness. And counsel did not only put to the witness those allegations of vote padding. Counsel put to the witness also allegations that for one regional coalition in Eastern region, there were 2 coalition chiefs. And counsel sought to go into that, which I will not go into. But my point, respectfully, is that counsel, in fact, in doing all that, counsel is really the one who has shown clearly the importance of the testimony of the chairperson to address these issues. My lords, we also had the testimony which showed, again in response to a question from the bench, which showed that the form which ostensibly, the Form 13 so-called, which ostensibly the chairperson had acted on prior to a declaration, was not in fact the form that is provided for in regulation in CI 127. That testimony was before this court. And my lords, it is respectfully only fair for the chairperson to have the opportunity to admit or deny that important piece of evidence which came from PW2 in answering a question from the bench. It is therefore our respectful submission that none of the points made in the affidavits in opposition provide a justification for our not being allowed to reopen our case, and therefore that your lordships, in the interests of achieving substantial justice, as your lordships have often expressed, you allow us to reopen our case on the grounds that we have urged and for the limited purpose that we have urged before you.
Yes, Minuvo.
My lords, we are opposed to this application to reopen the case of the petitioner. Lords, we have filed an affidavit in opposition, and Lords, we rely on the positions in the affidavit in opposition. My lords, this application has been filed following the ruling of this court on the 11th of February 2021. Lords, I believe that, therefore, Kanda demands that the petitioner would, in deposing to the reasons, assign the appropriate reasons to the court. My Lord, may I kindly refer you to paragraph 11 of the affidavit in support. In that paragraph 11, it is being alleged that the reason which the court gave was basically that, let me just read it. In respect specifically of the witness statement filed on behalf of the first respondent, the court decided that since she had not been called as a witness by the first respondent for her witness statement to be admitted in evidence, she would give under oath she was not available to be cross-examined. Lords, I have read the ruling of the court. Nowhere did the court say what the petitioner has said in paragraph 11 of his affidavit in support. Indeed, my lords, what the court said was that, with your kind permission, simply put, we are not convinced and will not yield to the invitation being extended to us by counsel for the petitioner to order the respondents to enter the witness box to be cross-examined. So the reason the court gave is that the petitioner is attributing another...
Mr. Menuvo,
yes, ma'am.
You cannot cross-examine a person who has not testified in chief.
Pardon me?
A person who has not testified in chief cannot be cross-examined.
Yes.
And this person had not even testified in chief.
Yes, your ladyship, but the point I'm making is that a reason is being assigned by the petitioner
I
to the
appreciate
court.
the point you're making. What I'm saying is that it seems to me to be a strange argument, because you cannot even talk about cross-examination when there hasn't been an examination in chief.
Your ladyship, where a supplicant, an applicant before the court, makes false statements to support his application, I believe that it is only fair that counsel will point out those false statements to the court. That is my submission, that the court assigned reasons in its ruling of 11th of February, and it shouldn't be what he has said in his affidavit in support.
My lords, I do not think that it can be claimed that we made a false statement. My lord, there is an account given of your ruling. Counsel is entitled to give a different account. Ultimately, it is for your lordship to determine whether what we have said. But to say it's a false statement that we have made in the affidavit, that, my lords, is not acceptable.
Well, I will draw the word false. It is an incorrect statement. My lords, yes, my lord. My learned friend was saying that my choice of word false. Yeah. That is why I said it is an incorrect deposition. Deposition, I get the correction, my lords. My lords.
Or it doesn't reflect what?
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Lords, a perusal of paragraph 13 and 14 again creates the impression that the court ruled in those matters that's in the review, in the interrogatories, on the basis that the first respondent chairperson will be available to be cross-examined. Lord, again, with your kind permission, regarding the ruling of the 11th, this is what my lordship said when that argument was made. We are also of the opinion that the filing of affidavits in interrogatory applications with the position that the deponent will be available for cross-examination does not make the deponent compellable to adduce evidence at the trial. As already stated, learned counsel for the petitioner only referred us to an affidavit deposed to by the chairperson of the first respondent in opposition to an interrogatory application to serve interrogatories. That affidavit is not evidence in this petition to enable us compel the first respondent to mount the witness box. So again, my lords, on the 11th of February, the court was very clear in its ruling. Now, my lords, in paragraph 16, the petitioner deposes that representations were made by me, or for that matter, the first respondent's chairperson, to him. Lords, I think that that is a very unfortunate statement, simply because the petitioner decided on his own to take the steps that he has taken in this matter. The petitioner, first of all, did not obey earlier orders of the court. And then when he obeyed the orders, he filed 2 witness statements. And then the petitioner subsequently sought leave of the court to call a witness. Then the petitioner decided that in spite of the fact that I had intimated in my petition that I was going to call 5 witnesses, I am limiting myself to 3. I closed my case. How petitioner will now see to say that it is as a result of misrepresentations that were made to him that he closed his case, I cannot fathom.
My Lord, respectfully, I never said misrepresentations made to me. I never said misrepresentations.
Yes, Lord. Lord, he said representations. I corrected to representations. Lord, again, paragraph 20 of the affidavit in support refers to a matter that this court ruled upon on the 11th of February 2021. This is what the court said on that. That is so, my Lord. Paragraph 20, where
Constitutional rule, the first respondent, please.
yes,
Are you not talking to via paragraph 20?
yes, sir, my Lord, yeah, paragraph 20. Yes,
the
Lord,
constitutional rule.
yes, my Lord, and my Lord's ruled on it, made a pronunciation on it. That was just going to,
You see, this application is not for review of the decision. Technically, in all substance, it is not for review. The case has been closed by both parties, and they are seeking the leave of the court to reopen. If I understand what the motion stands for.
yes, my Lord.
Yes, so please address it. This is paragraph 20 is just the constitutional rule.
Very well,
The first respondent
very well, my Lord.
is deemed by
Very well, my Lord.
law to play.
Yes.
You can
Well-
well, it's your case, but I think it is better maybe place emphasis on it.
Well, my Lord, with respect, I move on. May I refer your Lordship to...
Mr. Manuvo,
Yes, my Lord.
I think what my Lord, the Chief Justice, is saying is address us on why the petitioner should not be allowed, not be granted leave to open his case. That is what we want to hear from you.
Because you are opposed to the
Yes, my lords, I will come to that. But for example,
You are taking too long to get to that. That's what interests us.
very well. So, my lords, I take it that the paragraph 25, which is an untruth about what happened regarding pen drives. I think that in fairness,
you see, just like I drew Mr. Chikate's attention to, we only function with law here. So, first, my Lord Mafusa asked him what rule he was coming under. Then I asked him the grounds on which he wanted us to exercise our discretion. These are the things that we are interested in. So when you oppose it, tell us why we cannot grant this application or should not grant this application. And then the cosmetics can be dealt with later.
very well, my lords.
You see, you have spent some time seeking to attack the depositions in the affidavit in support of this application. Yes.
Well, my lord, I will move on. Lord, it is my submission that this application is not warranted by any rule of law or by procedure. And my lords, this court is primarily not a trial court, and therefore we may borrow from Rule 5 of CI 16. And Lord, if we borrow from Rule 5 of CI 16, the closest, yes, my Lord, Rule 5 of CI 16, which permits the court to go and look elsewhere. Lord, the closest that, yes, my Lord.
Is it not a settled practice that a case can be reopened in appropriate circumstances?
My lords, it is a settled practice, but there are circumstances.
Yes.
And so, my lords,
go there. That is what we want to know. They have argued at length that they want to reopen the case, and it is permissible in law. So you satisfy us in opposition why the application ought to be refused, because this application technically is directed against you.
yes, my lord, with
Yes,
respect.
they also close their case. They have, I'm talking of the second respondent, they also have a role to play. But they are not suggesting in the list that the case is reopened, they are going to serve the second respondent to come from the Jubilee House to give evidence.
Yes.
Have they said so?
My lords, well, I take a cue. My lords, the view I hold is that if I appear before the Supreme Court,
The court which is inviting you to address us
very well, my lord.
on some material
Very well, my
which
lord.
is agitating our mind.
Yes, my lord.
Yes.
My lord, so I will plead with your lordships to refer to a high court decision, which I know is not binding on your lordships, but with the greatest respect, it will help throw light on the circumstances under which a court will permit a party to reopen a case. My lords, may I refer your lordships to the case of Anobil versus Obosu and another, 1982-83, Ghana Law Report, Anobil versus Obosu, OBOSU and another, 1982-83, Ghana Law Report, 585. Lord, in that case, there was an application before Osefri J, as it then was. Lord, this was to reopen a case after the parties have closed their case. Now, His Lordship, in deciding whether or not to grant the application or refuse it, relied on the case of Young versus Kershaw. Young and the versus Kershaw. Kershaw, Kershaw. And Burton versus Kershaw, consolidated. (1899), 81 LT NS 531 at page 532. The Court of Appeal of the English courts, which Osefri relied on. With your kind permission, my lords, I read. It is a matter of greatest importance and has always been so treated by courts that all material evidence which could, with reasonable skill and diligence, be produced at the trial shall be the only evidence which can be considered and must be adduced at the trial. It is obviously in the public interest that parties who have gone through the ordeal of litigation and have had their rights settled at the trial should not afterwards be allowed to patch up the weak parts and fill up the omissions in their case by means of fresh evidence. It is true that in special and exceptional circumstances, a new trial has been granted because new evidence has been discovered. But the rule which permits that to be done is fenced round with many limitations. The party asking for the new trial must show that there was no remission on his part in adducing all possible evidence at the trial. Then again, as to the class of new evidence, the rule is that the new evidence must be such that, if adduced, it will be practically conclusive. That is, evidence of such a class as to render it probable, almost beyond doubt, that the verdict will not be different. And so, my lords, it's my submission that just as in Young versus Kershaw, this petitioner, with very competent legal representation, elected of his own volition to close his case, this should not afterwards be allowed. He should not afterwards be allowed to patch up the weak parts and fill up the omissions in his case by means of fresh evidence. And the only reason is that I wish to call the chairperson of the first respondent, who is the adversary, into the box by way of subpoena. My lords, this whole process that has been filed is an abuse of the court processes, my lords. Lords, with greatest respect, I have gone and done a bit of research all the way back to 1876, when we received the common law in our jurisdiction. I have not come across one case where a party closes his case and then he is seeking leave to reopen the case only because he wants the adversary to enter the witness box for him. My lords, it totally will collapse our adversarial system. My lords, we ask ourselves the question, assuming that this application is granted, does that mean that the court will now open the floodgates for the first and second respondents to give rebuttal evidence? My lords, it is just going to abuse the process, and it does not augur well for the determination of this matter, a specific matter under Article 64(1) of the Constitution and CI 99. My lord, for example, the motion is titled an application to enable, if I got it right.
No, it says motion of notice for release.
Yes, my lord.
The court of record.
Yes, I'm coming to read it. It says motion on notice for leave to recall the case of the petitioner to enable the reopen the case of the petitioner, to enable the chairperson. My lord, the key word is enable the chairperson of the Electoral Commission to testify. My lord, this alone, the title alone of the motion, should be a ground for a refusal of this application on grounds of abuse. My lord, well, the body says something else. He says that upon serving a subpoena. Lord, I believe that if I refer your lordship to Order 39, Rule 5 of the High Court Civil Procedure Rule, CI 47, the rules attach pain of punishment, among others, where a subpoena is served and you don't take certain steps. So, my lords, I believe that the depositions in the affidavit in opposition with reference to a subpoena, it's my submission, were right. Lord, there has been a submission which is to the effect that the way I cross-examined the first witness of the petitioner, I could only have gotten information from the chairperson of the first respondent. But my lords, if you go through the record, I used the witness's own exhibit D and E to make my analysis, and he admitted same. And Lords, regarding the evidence of the second and third witnesses of the petitioner, Lords, what they said, how they contradicted themselves is on the record. So the issue of the two different stories are for the court to determine. Very well, my Lord. Lord, I'll be ending soon. My Lord, I wish...
It's your time.
Yes, my Lord.
We are not even allotting time for counsel to be so, limited to within a very short time to present the submissions.
Yes.
So please, try and organize yourself and present your case. That is all.
Yes, my Lord. I have addressed you on the abuse of process, and then I just wish to end my lords with the fact that a person summoned on a subpoena testifies in court as the witness of the party who caused the subpoena to issue. This application that serves as notice to your lordships that your court will be required to issue a subpoena for the first respondent to testify as a petitioner's witness. Again, my lords, it confuses our adversarial system of adjudicating.
If Mr. Chikata said the person will be an adverse witness.
Yes, but your ladyship,
Hostile.
yes, but definitely it is a party that calls a hostile witness.
So, Mr. Manugo, can you address us on section 26 of the Evidence Act,
Yes.
which was argued by...
Stop there.
Yes. My lords, with respect, section 26 does not arise at all. Lords, if you go to section 24, it says that where the basic facts that give rise to a conclusive presumption are found or otherwise established in the action, no evidence contrary to the conclusively presumed fact may be considered before the tribunal of fact. Then it is juxtaposed with section 26. It says that except as otherwise provided by law, including a rule of equity, where a party has by its own statement, act, or omission intentionally, deliberately caused or permitted another person to believe in a thing to be true, etc. Lords, a combined reading of these two do not support the petitioner's case one whit. My lords, what are the presumed facts in this matter? The presumed facts, so far, the petitioner has been silent on. All he says is that, oh, I didn't anticipate that the first respondent will close his case, and therefore, I think that there are matters that will support my case, and therefore she should be called. That's it. It has nothing to do...
If I heard Mr. Chikata right, the presumed facts are that, one, in your statement of case, you alluded to the fact that the chairperson of the first respondent will make it available for cross-examination, that he will testify. And then the other one was the averment in the position where she indicated to be available.
My Lord, that was why I was referring your lordships to the various rulings on the court that had determined the matter. But my Lord said I should go to the sub. So it's my submission that the various ruling by the court for interrogatories, review, discovery, they have all addressed the matters that he is raising. That's my submission. Lords, on a lighter note, God is a God of conscience. My Lord, I believe that.
Ask him to go that far. It is in the court of law.
Yes.
Yes.
But my Lord, with respect, with the greatest respect.
When we come here and we take the oath and we swear on the cross or on the Bible, so be it. Yes.
My Lord, with respect, may my counsel for the petitioner consistently made statements attacking the faith of the chairperson of the first responders.
We corrected him. I think we corrected him that we are not here to demonstrate the
Very well, my Lord.
of parties and witnesses.
My Lord. Yes. Yes. Lords, lastly, it is my submission that no representation has been made whatsoever to the petitioner for which, based on that, he is bringing this application. Lords, I don't think that it is fair for the petitioner to blame the respondents rather than himself for the reason why his action had taken the stages that it took. Lords, I repeat that the first respondent is vehemently opposed to this application and prays for its dismissal. My Lord, I'm grateful to the court.
As I said, the application is directed basically against the first respondent. But since you were served.
Yes, my Lord, and I believe that the ruling of the court on the application
It will affect the case in general. That is
would
why you want
affect
to. Yes.
materially our position in this matter. So we are entitled to give a full response to the application. My Lord, I wish to make a preliminary observation, submission, which is that ours is an adversarial system of litigation. It is not inquisitorial. Secondly, in that system of litigation, the question of burden of proof and the burden of producing evidence is fundamental. It's one of substantive law. And therefore, a party that bears the burden of proof and the burden of producing evidence, as the petitioner undoubtedly does, must effectively meet that burden of proof. And Lords, it is well established that where the party bearing the burden of proof and burden producing evidence fails to meet these two burdens, the court has every right to dismiss the party's plaint, because the party's reliefs can only be obtained if he leads evidence that meets these two burdens. And it's our submission, my lords, that to date, the petitioner, in our respectful view, has failed woefully.
Are you addressing this?
No, my lords.
You are making a general, don't go
My
there.
lord, I'm setting a foundation for my specific arguments. You know.
These are general propositions of law.
Yes.
Yes. And credit us with that knowledge of the law.
Very well. My lord, I wish to rely on my depositions, the depositions in the affidavit of second respondent in opposition to the petitioner's motion for leave to reopen the case. All the depositions. And my lords, particularly, I wish to refer your lordships to paragraph 12, paragraph 13, paragraph 14, 15, 16, and 17. My lords, it is our view that the general principle of law is that once a party to a suit announces to the court that he has no additional evidence to adduce and thus closes the case, the court is obliged to affirm the decision of the party. And my lords, we wish in that respect to refer your lordships to Lai versus Oforiwa, 1984-86, 2 Ghana Law Report, 410 at 427. And that's a court of appeal case, Oforiwa, 1984-85, 2. 1984-86. My lord, it's 84-86. 2 Ghana Law Reports, 410. A court of appeal case, where at page 427, the court held that the learned counsel submitted that the trial was unsatisfactory, for the learned trial judge closed the case for the defense when the cross-examination of the defendant's witness had not been completed. I think this is not a fair criticism of the learned trial judge, for the record clearly indicated that it was the defense counsel who announced to the court that he was not calling further evidence. He was closing his case. In the circumstances, the court could not do otherwise but to accede to the request of the learned counsel and close the case for the defense. Counsel for the defendant contended that in any case it was wrong on the part of the counsel who appeared in the court below to have closed the case of the defendant at that stage simply because the witness was not available for further cross-examination. But it seems to me that the learned counsel in the court below acted wisely and in the best interest of his clients, and that any counsel placed in the situation in which would have acted in similar manner. And Lord, it is our submission that it was counsel for petitioner who voluntarily announced to the court that he had closed his case. My lords, he did so taking note of all the evidence adduced by witnesses and through cross-examination of witnesses. My Lord, that evidence included what happened in the strong room. The evidence also included the alleged conversation between the third witness of the petitioner and the chair of the first respondent, and it also alleged irregularities in the collation of results. Because the petitioner led all the evidence that he had in proof of these allegations through the three witnesses. My Lord, he cannot, having led evidence that was within his knowledge, or that he could have, by exercising due diligence, obtained, now come back after closing his case to apply to the court to reopen the case simply to lead further evidence on the same matters. My Lord, the petitioner also led evidence on what he considered to be unconstitutional actions, lack of transparency and fairness by the chairperson of the EC. Evidence was led on all these things. My Lord, so the question is, if the case is closed and the respondents elect not to adduce further, enter the box and adduce evidence, the question then is for the court to look at the evidence before it and determine whether or not the petitioner has led evidence to meet his claims and reliefs. And my Lord, it is important to underline the point that this has absolutely nothing to do with why the first respondent's chair does not want to enter the box. It is a totally irrelevant question at law. It is totally irrelevant. Again, it has nothing to do with the suggestion that the first respondent's chair must be pleased to have an opportunity to vindicate herself. Now, these matters are completely irrelevant to the application to reopen one's case and lead what in effect is fresh evidence. Because the idea is to reopen the case, subpoena the first respondent's chair so that he can lead further evidence. That is new evidence. And my lords, it is our respectful view, that the petitioner is bound to meet the time-tested conditions established by this court to lead new fresh evidence. He cannot hide behind the application to reopen so as to subpoena, to suggest that this is not in substance an application to adduce fresh evidence. And if it is, as I think it is, then he must meet two basic conditions. One, that the fresh evidence that he is seeking to adduce through the subpoena was not available and could not have been obtained through due diligence. Whereas it's a submission that the proceedings of this court show clearly that the evidence on these four matters, what happened in the alleged encounter between the chairperson of the first respondent and the second and third witnesses of the petitioner, what happened in the strong room, the allegations of irregularity are clearly before this court. So it cannot be fresh evidence. Secondly,
fresh evidence. Please look critically at the motion.
He's seeking to reopen the case.
That's right.
So that he can subpoena. My Lord, and that is why, my Lord, with all due respect, that is why I think that the substance of the content of what he intends to achieve through the subpoena must be assessed, evaluated by this honorable court before it can decide whether or not to exercise its discretion in granting the application to reopen.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Jisi, we heard him. Sorry, Mr. Kutampa.
My lords, my good friend, Mr. Chachichikata referred to me as my friend Sheshe in the course of these proceedings.
You see, I think he made a point that they want to reopen their case so that they can serve subpoena on on Mrs. Jane Mensah, so that she can be treated as a hostile witness. Yes. So address that, please.
My lords.
Mr. Kutampa, whilst you're addressing it, I also understood from him that you did some harm in cross-examination. You brought certain things out in cross-examination. So he should be allowed to speak to that through the process of the subpoena.
Yes. My lord, our case is that at the time he was electing to close his case, he knew, the petitioner knew these new matters that were elicited from his witnesses were matters of record. And if he really intended to do that, he should have applied to the court to enable him to lead, to file a new witness statement, to lead evidence on that. He didn't do so. He had all the information at that time, and he boldly declared to the court that he was closing his case. The only reason why now the petitioner is applying to reopen his case is because after he closed his case, the respondents exercised a right that they had not to adduce any evidence. And my lords, counsel for the petitioner and the petitioner cannot say that they did not have an inkling of an idea that this was a possible approach that the respondents would adopt. First, because it is a process that is available in any trial for defendants.
Second, Mr. Kutampa, look at paragraph 16 of the affidavit in support. They said they were taken by surprise.
Yes.
By that year.
Yes,
it therefore came as a surprise.
Yes.
That both counsel for the respondent announced on Monday, 8 February 2021, that this was no longer the case. This was no longer the case. Paragraph 16 of the affidavit in support. Which means they had prepared to cross-examine your witnesses. And that was why they closed their case.
Yes.
They had no inkling whatsoever that you were going to close your case.
Yes.
And then this matter came to them as a surprise.
Yes. My lords, if I may respond to that. My first point is that if they had thought through fully the case of the respondents, they would have known that this was very likely to happen. Because right from the beginning of our filing our answers, we had served notice to them and the court that we didn't think that we had any case at all for us to be even heard. And yet, this honorable court, in its own wisdom, directed that you would deal with our preliminary objection at the end of the trial. So, they must have had notice that it was likely, if they failed to lead sufficient evidence, that we will not adduce any evidence. And consistent with our original and primary position, we would ask the court to determine the matter on the evidence before it. So, it is, I cannot believe that my learned friend, Mr. Chachikata, would not have anticipated this matter as a matter of strategy. He should have, and if he didn't, well, my lords, that would be too bad for his client.
Mr. Kotambo, if I recall, your submissions are already on file, aren't they? Your preliminary objections?
Yes.
They're already on record?
Yes.
Everybody's?
Yes, they've been served. Now, my lords, so that deals with the surprise. And my lords, again, it cannot be the case that they were relying on the statement made by chairperson of first respondent that even if the interrogatories fail, they would have an opportunity during cross-examination. My lord, that cannot be, as I've earlier stated, cannot be a commitment to the fact that we shall lead evidence to the chief. It is only a legal argument that you may have that opportunity during cross-examination. And that opportunity will arise only if you enter the box to lead evidence in chief. So it can never constitute a fact under section 2524 of the Evidence Act, upon which they acted to their detriment, and therefore we are estopped, or the first respondent is estopped from exercising his right not to adduce evidence. It cannot be. And my lord, what is even more interesting is that those provisions of the Evidence Act, my lord, you see that section 24 that he reads says that conclusive 24(2) reads, conclusive presumption include but are not limited to those provided in section 25 to 29. And my lords, if one goes to 25(1), it says, except otherwise provided by law, including a rule of equity, the facts recited in a written document are conclusively presumed. Again, in 26, except as otherwise provided.
Yes, on 24 and 25 deals with the contracts and conveyance.
Yes, but my lord, I'm saying that you will see these provisions must be read as a whole. You cannot take this out because section 26 again repeats the except as provided by law, including real evidence. When a party has by his own statement, act, or omission, intentionally or deliberately, caused or permitted another party to believe a thing to be true and to act upon such belief, the truth of that thing shall be conclusively presumed. So there are exceptions in law and in equity. So it is not, and the same goes for section 27, 28, and 29. So my lords, I think that it is misconceived for counsel for the petitioner to suggest that the conclusive nature of the alleged statement of fact by first respondent is not limited in any way. And it is, in our view, limited by the right of the respondents to elect not to adduce evidence. My lords, again, we wish to refer your lordships to the case of the president of the Methodist Church of Ghana versus K spelled K-Y-E, K-A-Y-E. Well, the president of the Methodist Church of Ghana versus K. My Lord, it's a judgment of the High Court, Cape by Owusu J, as it then was delivered on 10th April 1970. It's a one-page ruling, my Lord. 10th April 1970.
Is it in the 1970 current cases?
No, it's actually in the law reports 1970, but we couldn't.
1970.
Yes. But we have
the current cases.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So, my Lord,
What did the judge say?
held. Once a party closes his case, he abandons every right to call further evidence, except with the leave of the court. Precisely, that's why I'm saying that this is an attempt to call further evidence. That is the point I'm making, my lords. You know, and he must be held to the rule or the conditions to be met in order to adduce fresh evidence or further evidence, to use his words. Such an application is only considered when at the time of closing the case, no human ingenuity could foresee the existence of the particular evidence the party is seeking to adduce. That cannot be the case in this situation, my lords. Again, my lords, we also rely on Honorable and Obosu and another, referred to by counsel for first respondents. And again, my lords, refer your lordships to the case of Combat versus Lambin, 1989. Sorry, my lords. Combat spelled K-O-M-B-A-T versus Lambin, L-A-M-B-I-N, 1989, 91 Ghana Law Reports, 324, where Ben J, as he then was, at the close of Pretty's case, called a witness Somoto, who testified, where the trial court
Was it the Benny J who called?
No, the trial court. The trial court.
This was his similar.
Yes. It was a trial court, yes. After the case of the plaintiff's case, the trial court called a witness, Somoto, who testified in support of the defendant. And based on that testimony, the case of the plaintiff was thrown out. The plaintiff appealed against the decision of the court. The High Court, Quorum Benny J. Accident, was allowing the appeal, stated as follows. The general rule of evidence was that after a prisoner's case was closed, a judge should only call a fresh witness when a new matter had arisen ex improviso, which would not have been foreseen. Such a witness could, in civil cases, only be called with the consent of all the parties. My Lord, let me emphasize, with the consent of all the parties in civil case. My lords, we believe that the authorities in Canada, Commonwealth jurisdiction, common law jurisdiction, may, with respect, assist your lordships. And we wish to refer to the case of Ontario Limited versus Sagas Industries, Canada Incorporated. It's a 2001 SEC 59 or 2 SCR 98. That's the Supreme Court of Canada. There, the High Court approved of the two-stage test first articulated in the case of Scott versus Cook, 1970, OJ number 1487. Namely, the test which is intended to assist the trial judge in exercising his or her discretion to reopen the trial requires the moving party, one, to show that the evidence he or she seeks to adduce is such that if it had been presented at trial, would probably have changed the results. And two, prove that such evidence could not have been obtained by reasonable diligence before the trial court. Now, these are the same principles that this honorable court applies in adducing fresh evidence. Now, my lords, it is our submission that this case is about votes and numbers. My lord, there is nothing about the engagement between the second and third witnesses of the petitioner, alleged engagement with the chairperson of first respondent. Even if true, that has been shown to have had any material effect on the outcome of the elections. And we demonstrated that quite thoroughly during our cross-examination of Mr. Asiedin Ketia, where we took him through all the different stages to show that no matter what you do, first, second respondent cross the 50+ threshold, and petitioner persistently remained around 47%. So, and truth be told, the third witness actually declared during cross-examination why they were going to see the petitioner. What was it? They were going to tell him about the irregularities and errors in the collation process. Now the question is, does their claim of irregularities and errors in the collation process legally stop the EC and the returning officer of the presidential election from exercising her independent function and duty to declare election results if, in her view, the election results were accurate? The only thing that the petitioner could do would be to come to court to demonstrate that the election results were not accurate. So, my lords, one cannot fault the EC chair until you come to court and are able to show that the election results were not accurate. And
please address us on the general principles which you've based your submission on the authorities. Yes. The EC on record is not your client.
My lords, I'm a bit taken aback.
Reopening the case may have serious consequences on the case. because both of you may do so many things. But for the time being, yes, the application is for the reopening of the case for the petitioner.
Yes,
and your attention has been so much on the first respondent. And I'm saying that on record, they are not even saying that when the case is reopened, they will subpoena the second respondent to mount the witness box.
That's exactly what they said.
So we want you to address us on why the reopening should.
Very well.
Yes, I think you have to understand the bench.
Very well.
Yes, because they are not asking for anything from the second respondent.
Very well. My lords, my simple submission is that to reopen, they must satisfy the two preconditions. One, that the evidence they intend to lead was not available to them at the time they closed their case and could not have been obtained by the exercise of due diligence. Yes. And two, that the evidence they intend to adduce, if they are given leave to reopen their case, on the case. And they are saying that there's no way that it will have a material effect on the case, given the evidence before the court. Even if they use her as a voter witness. Even if they choose to use her as a holster witness, my lords. My lords, we also wish to refer your lordships. My lords, we also wish to refer your lordships to the oft-quoted case of Dombo and others, versus now 1970 CC 68, the Court of Appeal case. And then, yes. But it
an
is
appeal. So the principles are never the same. Adoption of fresh evidence on appeal has nothing to do with reopening of a substantive case at the court. Yes, or to reopen it.
My lord,
Please.
My lord, the principles apply in pari materia. That is my submission. And the principles apply in pari materia. And my lords, 68, a Court of Appeal decision. And my lords, again, in Poku versus Poku, 2007-2008, 1996, Supreme Court of Ghana Law Report, 1996, 996, sorry. Now, my lords, it's our case that the decision of the court in Poku and Poku, even though referred to adducing fresh evidence on appeal, are the same in the case where a party closes his case and applies to reopen his case to adduce further evidence. They apply pari materia. And in that case, would CJ observe as follows at page 1015. Consequently, the invariable rule, as I understand it, is that in an application to lead fresh evidence or new evidence, the first criteria which an applicant ought to establish is whether or not the evidence sought to be adduced was not in the possession of the applicant party or was not obtainable by the exercise of reasonable diligence or human ingenuity before the impugned decision was rendered. It is only when this first hurdle has been surmounted that the court should proceed to determine the other pertinent question of whether or not the intended evidence would have a positive effect on the outcome. Stated differently, if the first criterion is not met, no useful purpose will be served by examining the other factors. And my lords, it is our submission in respect, if I may make submissions on the question of subpoena, or it is not a matter before your lordship. My lord, it is our submission that the application of the 65 Rule 4 of the High Court rules, CI 47, states, Order 35, Rule 4. Yes, Rule 4. States thus, a writ of subpoena ad testificandum, or a writ of subpoena duces tecum, to compel the attendance of a witness for the purpose of proceeding in chambers may be issued out of the registry if the party who desires the attendance of the witness produces a note from the judge or register authorizing the issue of the writ. Further, Section 88(1) of the Evidence Act 1975, NRCD 323, provides inter alia that, except as otherwise provided in this part of, of Evidence Act 1975, states inter alia thus, except as otherwise provided in this part or in any other enactment, no person has a privilege to refuse when duly subpoenaed to the witness. Now, my lords, the petitioner applied to this court to open his case and to issue a subpoena to compel the chairperson of first respondent to testify. My lords, this should be viewed, this application should be viewed in the peculiar circumstances that first respondent has already elected not to adduce any evidence in this petition. And the court has affirmed its right not to elect or to adduce any evidence. My lords, the process of cross-examination involves adducing evidence. And so, my lords, it's our submission that the object of this application to reopen the case is precisely the object of their opposition to the respondent's election not to adduce evidence. And it is our respectful submission that the court, having upheld that right of the first respondent and the respondents generally to elect not to adduce evidence, cannot with one hand affirm that right and with the other hand disaffirm it by allowing the petitioner to subpoena him, to cross-examine him, and thereby adduce evidence from her. I think that would be inconsistent with the court's own ruling. My Lord,
Mr. Tuampa, based on the submissions you've just made, what would be your comment on paragraph 15 of petitioner's affidavit in support?
Yes, paragraph 15, my lord. Yes, my lord, it's saying that it has become necessary. My lord, we say that they have demonstrated absolutely no necessity. My lord, the petitioner has demonstrated no necessity. Because, with all due respect, they have not shown how the grant of the application would have a material effect. That's the necessity. Material effect on the outcome of the matter in dispute. They have not shown it. All that they have said is that the EC has a constitutional role. It has to be accountable. The chair of the EC has to be accountable to the people. So, and your lordship, in their ruling, said that the rules that apply to ordinary people in these circumstances equally apply to the EC chair. That's what your lordship's ruling a few days ago stated. So, my lords, we do not see that they have demonstrated any necessity. All the necessity is based on the fact, the allegation that the chair of the first respondent is stopped from saying that he will not enter the box because she had already committed herself so to do. When the chair of the second respondent never, ever committed herself to that.